I call the meeting of the Ad hoc Policy Committee, Subcommittee to order. First item on the agenda is, for the record, the full committee is present, also present are Dr. Rodriguez. Other members of the board present are Dr. Gwads, Mr. Stribinger, and Mr. Earl Campbell. Rachel Jones is here as a civilian. Okay,
Sounds so official.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Virtual flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, obviously the media has been notified. Next item is to approve the minutes.
Agenda first. Approve the agenda first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda.
I move.
Second.
Did you second? Okay. Been made and seconded, all in favor? It passes unanimously. Okay, now we get to the minutes. There's one little thing about the minutes I noticed is that it says we'll start on 23.6, and we're actually going to start on 3.4, Roman number 13. So if we can have a motion to approve with changes that are noted that we've done. Yes, David?
I just want to point out that that second highlight, I'm not sure that's English. Mr. Campbell made that Mr. Dowling. It says,
Made the motion.
yeah,
Thank you.
you might want to change that.
Yes, Mr. Dowling, if you
Okay.
sometime.
Oh. Yes.
I think minutes also need a correction at under highlights, the last bullets there. The committee has been given an extension for finishing work, has been given a third extension for finishing its work. The committee agreed that the agreement, if you listen to the tape, is that the policy manual review would be completed by the end of the month, and that the board members would receive it August 1st. This is kind of nebulous the way it is here.
So to say that the board members will receive it August 1st and review it at
Yeah,
the work
and then-
session.
Yes,
Discuss it
exactly,
at work
because they
session.
need a 2-week notice. I don't think that's only fair to the board members.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Yes, sir.
Mel moves.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to accept the minutes with changes noted. All in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay, Dr. Rodriguez, I just want to give you a brief update on why we're all here. Okay. The last policy manual update was done in 2016. The board hired the School Board Association last year to do a look at our existing policies in order to check out their legality, which they did, and most of what they did you see in red. At the time it was presented, though, the members of the board felt that even though they had commented on legality, we still had work to do as to what we wanted. Okay, so that is why we're here now. Okay. We're almost done. The requirement is to submit a new manual proposal to the board by 1 August. Then the board will, individual members can take the next 2 weeks to review it, and then we'll discuss it and hopefully act on it at the 16th and 17th of August work session. Okay?
Yep.
Now tonight we're going to begin with Roman numeral 13. Members may, I'm just going to read it to recalibrate everybody, okay? Members may request information from the superintendent if the information sought does not exist and must be created or developed, or if responding to the information will take substantial staff time, then the superintendent shall notify the board of the request such that the board chair may determine whether the superintendent or his or her designee shall respond to the request. All information provided pursuant to this paragraph shall be provided to all board members. Okay, last week we discussed this quite a bit, and we're unable to come to closure on it, so. Does anyone want to kick off the discussion? No, okay. My concern about it is twofold. Number one, the phrase substantial staff time, I think that needs to be quantified or described a little bit better than that, because that's in the eye of the beholder, you know. What's substantial to one person might not be substantial to another. And the second thing is, and this is based on the position of chair, not whoever's in it or not in it, but I personally don't think that the chair should determine whether the superintendent shall respond to the request. We've had instances in the past with prior chair people that certain members got marginalized in having their requests approved, or when they had to submit a FOIA request, which has been the case sometimes, to have different quotes given to different members for basically the same request. So if you want to give us some input as to how you feel about that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I think the issue around substantial staff time, you know, a particular request at the moment, right, doesn't necessarily take into account the full scope of work that whoever's responsible for that as an individual has necessarily on their plate, right? So substantial staff time can be, you know, quite a bit, and it could take a while for some requests.
Okay.
That's just one
Okay.
thought that comes to
All
mind.
right. So is it, as it's, just, I'm thinking out loud now, as a suggestion, perhaps if we say that under normal circumstances, requests for information will be given to the superintendent by the appropriate board committee? Or do you want to continue having Dr. Berg gave us sort of carte blanche in terms of, if he had a question of finance, you could go right to Tanya on it. That's not strictly apropos to our policy, but he did give us that. So, and I'm not recommending that continue, but that's the way that it has been.
At the moment, I'm not really privy to what the conversation around it, from the board, whether it didn't allow consensus.
Yeah. See, I would object to any situation set up that presumes that anybody asks these questions out of idle curiosity. I think that everybody has a real reason for asking for data, and the reason for their asking for data should not be subject to review by anybody else on the board, including the chair. We're all equal, we're all elected officials, so if we have a need for data, I think we should be able to go to you as members, and if there's a problem with the staff being able to comply, perhaps you could talk to each individual board member, or the board member who made the request, and work out some kind of arrangement about when it could be done, if it could be done, etc. Does that sound reasonable?
The only thing, interested in hearing how the rest of the board feels about that, because a request by one for information, I would assume everybody wants all the information if somebody's gonna get it, or.
So I was gonna make a suggestion is that we maybe try to model this, after the policy that we just wrote for putting, for agenda setting, where it's CC'd to the entire board, so then you can get board input as well if necessary, just kind of model it similarly. Because that's currently not a component of this, where anybody else, it just says that an individual member can write to the superintendent and say, I want this, and nobody else would know about it. I'm sure they'd like to know that information. And they can put in their input as well, say, I'd actually like to maybe modify the request and ask for something additional, or give additional input.
Does that mean that somebody along the line in the process would have veto power over the request? Okay.
Because
Because-
there's not
yeah.
veto power currently in our agenda setting.
So keep in mind too, that anybody who asks for information, if they don't get the information, they can put in a FOIA request for it, you know? And then compliance is a much more objective question than something as subjective as substantial staff time. Okay. So, Dr. Guat.
So I take issue with, and that there should be, you know, a committee coming to the superintendent, because we've established, and we will further define that, you know, the committee, per our current policy, is that the committee is doing the work for the board. Whatever work they're doing has to be authorized for the board. So I don't think a committee should come and ask you for information unless the board had authorized that committee to work on that information, or they need it for the work that they're doing for the board. I see that as more problematic. I think any single board member should be able to request information, but the way Rachel said, I think it should go to everybody, and then if, you know, people wanna modify, I mean, everybody should have the same answer, or get all the same answers, so you're not, you know, you're not repeating yourself 11
Well,
times
it
or
does,
whatever.
it does say in the last sentence of this, that all information provided pursuant
Yeah.
to this paragraph shall be provided to all board members. So that means that everybody would get the answer to the individual's question. A scenario I'm trying to avoid is, let's say that I make a request of the superintendent to give me all legal invoices from any or all attorneys for the last 9 months, okay? I might have a need for something I'm working on for that. I don't think that I or any individual board member should have a funnel that they have to go through where anybody can say, no, they don't need that information, okay? Now, I don't care if it's gotta go through an agenda setting meeting, although since agenda setting meetings only happen once a month.
No, that's not what I was saying. I
Okay.
was saying model it after the language. So under, let me see, pull it up so everybody can look at it. 2.4, Roman numeral 8, C.
It's Lori, first
That's
time
where
I've
it
been late.
lays out how an item can get put onto the agenda. So every board member may request a topic or matter to be included on future agendas if it falls under the purview. So I'm just saying that this currently says, you know, that it would go to the officers, so, and that other board members who wish to indicate their support can do so via email. I'm just saying that it could go to the superintendent, the request could go from a board member to the superintendent, but we should probably CC everybody else so that they can put in input, not veto power or anything, but I think the problem lies with if they wait until the information comes out, there may have been something else that someone could have added, and then you're duplicating efforts by employees or personnel. So say you wanted receipts or whatever for legal services, someone else might want to add the timeline.
Piggyback
Or
on that.
piggyback on it,
All right.
and then they're gonna have to do more work on top of that.
Well, how about then if we had a 1-week suspense period where a person makes a request to the superintendent, copies the full board, the superintendent doesn't even have to act on it for a week, which gives every other board member a chance to piggyback, for lack of a better word.
Do that.
That makes sense? Earl's next, he's been waiting patiently.
Yeah. My concern, and I've voiced this over and over, is that I've seen emails where one board member will request something from one of the staff members, and I want it as soon as possible. I want it tomorrow. That is not the way we should do it. Because I don't want to, some of the stuff that board members request, I don't want to see it, you know? And I just believe that the request should go to the chair, from the chair to the superintendent, and then deal with it that way. Because some stuff was requested for the finance, and Tanya is busy. She stays busy. And you can't make the man and tell him, I want it tomorrow. You know, that's my concern, you know. Because what I may want, the rest of you may not want to see it, you know. So that's just my concern. I've always complained about that.
I agree with you, Earl, in that I think that the request ought to go to the superintendent, particularly if that's what the superintendent wants. However, I still, nobody but the person making the request should be able to validate the legitimacy of that request. That's just my, so, under Rachel's suggestion, we would simply take the language of putting something on the agenda. We could go back into that policy and say this policy shall also apply to any requests.
Well, it probably would have to be wordsmithed a little bit, just because of the way that
Okay.
it's got some things that wouldn't really necessarily apply. But I was just trying to use something as a model
no, that
to
makes
show
sense.
that it had different checkpoints and ways for things to get on there so that everybody was touched.
All right, so we want to make sure that everybody knows about the request, and we want to make sure that everybody gets the information that the response contains, correct? Yes, David, and then Mel.
Mel might have been first.
Okay.
I like everything that you're saying, I think it's great, but I always wonder what the purpose of the request is. I think it would really help, especially if other board members are gonna feedback on it, if the purpose of the request could be made. You know, I'm researching this, or I'm trying to establish this. Give everybody else a chance to say, well, you know, you might want to look at this data over here also.
Okay, I hear you loud and clear, but to me that implies that I have given you judgmental authority over whether my query is worthwhile or not. We're all equal, 11 elected officials, okay? So it's not for me to judge whether you're making a legitimate request for information, or what your motivations are, or why you want it. It's not for me to do that. You have a right to ask for that as an elected official to do your job.
I didn't mention judgment anywhere in there. I just said purpose. If you could just state the purpose of your request, it would help the rest of the board members if they want to piggyback on. I think it's a great idea.
Okay. So as long as,
I'm researching this because I'm
as
researching.
long as nobody can chip in and say, well, I think that purpose is redundant or ridiculous or anything like that. You either piggyback or you don't do anything, right?
Right.
Okay, great. Okay, Mel.
Well, two things. I think the board will ultimately decide whether it's nonsense or not when it comes back, whatever you research. But the first thing is the research, and the key thing in my mind is the substantial staff time and what the process is. You know, because I don't think we have any reason to judge it unless it's going to tie up the staff longer than necessary. Then we should have an input right away, whether we need it or not.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. What do you mean by tie up the staff?
It's a substantial time. It's longer than what's a legitimate time period for that request in terms of the staff's normal duties. That's
I
what
think a normal duty is to keep the governing board informed with any information
Well, yeah,
that
but
it
not-
or a member requests.
But not a bunch of individual member requests, I don't think.
don't forget, we're asking the superintendent, not the employee, okay? So the superintendent, part of the superintendent's function is to keep the board, governing board informed.
Yep. We can ask them, a bunch of
So
stuff.
whether it can be acted on right away, or whether it could be,
There's a
whether it's
substantial
gonna
time,
need
yeah.
3, 4, 5 weeks, that's a separate
Right,
question.
and there's where we weigh in. You might want it next week, and it might take, he might say, okay, that's gonna take quite a bit of time. You said you wanted it next week. We gotta weigh in on whether he go on and abort whatever else he's doing and get it to us next week. Or we say, no, let's allow more time. The board had to, I think the board has to rule on that, because those other weeks that could be utilized for other things is what we're waiting on when we fast forward yours.
Can I make a suggestion?
I hear you loud and clear. You know, my opinion is still that it ought to be good between the superintendent and the person who made the request as to when it will be delivered. And with the full knowledge of the board that this communication is taking place.
You won't have any way in at all. So you're saying the stuff that says on here, then the superintendent shall notify to put a request such at the board, well, it says board chair, that's where I've struck chair. May determine whether the superintendent's designee shall respond to the request. And I think that's a legitimate thing, or else you could tie up the superintendent the rest of the term, and none of us have any say on
Do
it.
you want the chair to be able to tell the superintendent whether or not to honor
I
the
know, I
request?
spoke to that, I said, no, I chair.
All right.
But bottom line is, I want the board to be able to say, hey, this is how we think you should proceed, instead of you saying how we should proceed.
What you're saying is logical, but I think it amounts to groupthink, or sets a tendency to get into
That's what the
groupthink.
board is.
Because if someone, because in the past, I know you don't wanna hear about the past, but in the
Right,
past,
yes, you do.
in the past, we have had individuals marginalized, and any request they made, regardless of the merits of the request, it was not honored. Because one block was gonna say no,
Yeah, but
and then another block was saying, okay, that's
I
what I want to
understand that.
avoid.
I understand that fully, and that's more reason why I believe what I believe, because it'll get us to begin to respect each other's opinion and understand each other's philosophy, and everybody will have the same agenda.
Okay, we can put it to a vote, okay? What, Rachel?
I'm gonna make a suggestion for the language.
Okay.
Okay, and it's gonna be kinda long, so I don't know if we need to record it so that we can listen back to it. I mean, I know we're recording there, but I mean like right now, so that we can vote on it. But, so I'm wordsmithing, 2.4, Roman numeral 8, subsection C, which is about board meeting agendas, and currently what's under board policy for this, Roman numeral 13. So, board members may request information from the superintendent. This request should be made via email to the superintendent. When possible, the purpose for the request will be given. Other board members who wish to indicate their support for the item should do so via email to the superintendent. The timing of the receipt of the request combined with the length of time necessary to gather supporting information when necessary will determine when the response is received. Once that determination has been made, the superintendent will notify the board members of the plan for addressing the topic or matter requested. All
So,
information provided pursuant to this paragraph shall be provided to all board members.
so moved.
So,
Motion's been made and seconded, all in favor? Okay, you got that?
you have to read it back so we can be clear.
I'm not gonna lie.
Thank you, Rachel, that's good work.
It's on there.
Okay, moving right
Yeah.
along to a no-brainer, the 3.8 conflict of interest section.
Three point,
Now we're
three
gonna go
point
to,
five,
we're
three
gonna,
point six.
Huh?
Are we doing
3.6.
Did I skip over something?
Yeah,
we need to go to
3.6.
3.6 in the black.
Oh, in the black,
In the-
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
It should be in the section part usable.
Okay, 3.6 is compensation. Annual salary, each board shall receive compensation amount of $7,500 per year, except for the chair, who will receive an additional $1,000 for a total of $8,500 annually. Anybody got an issue with that? Okay. The board may amend the annual salary for members of the board only after 3 readings of the issue at public, regularly scheduled monthly meetings, and after allowing public comment on the issue. No increase, well, it has happened for a policy anyway, so I don't see why it's regurgitated again. But anyway, no increase in the salary of board members may take effect until after the next general election for board members. Stipend, each board member shall receive $50 for attendance at any scheduled or special called board meeting or any scheduled meetings of a board committee, except work sessions and board meetings or board hearings lasting more than 4 hours in a single. In the event the committee meeting immediately precedes a board meeting, board members meeting the requirements of this policy shall receive 1 per diem payment.
You only get paid for 1 meeting. So
Okay.
like you had there was agenda setting on this meeting. So you don't, if you attended both, you only get paid for 1 of the meetings.
Okay, and what's the rationale for that? If you had the meetings on 2 separate days, you'd get 2 stipends, right? And the purpose of the stipend is for attending the meeting. So why does it become different if those meetings are back to back on the same day? I'm not challenging you directly, I'm just asking the question.
Board compensation, the amount of budget.
Well,
You know, just
Wendy,
trying to minimize.
On compensation, annual salary, sentence number 3, we just need a period at the end of that. We know the period at the end of 3, just a scrivener. Thank you.
Mel, did you have
I was gonna say, probably she's right in terms of budget. Wanna minimize how much money is spent out for each particular meeting. You know what I'm saying? At max, no more than 11 times 50. HD.
Yeah.
Any given day.
Granted, it's expensive, but the point I'm trying to make is that the stipend is given for attending the meeting. And what difference does it make if it's part of a multiple set of meetings, or if it's scheduled out over 3 or 4 days? I can't see the difference.
One of the reasons of different days is you're taking to the fact that the travel time, you're going and coming back. When they were looking at this, you were having meetings back to back. An example, the agenda setting meeting only lasted 30 minutes. So and then you had a break, and then this meeting started at 5:30. Well, this meeting will last more than 30 minutes, but they weren't paying. You would be getting $50 for a minute that lasted 30, a meeting that lasted 30 minutes, and then the next meeting that followed right after that. So it was more about budgetary and compensation.
But you could be getting $50 for 3, 4, even 5 hours of meetings.
If it's meetings over 4 hours, whatever, it becomes $100
But under this policy,
for 1 meeting.
right,
Yes, sir.
all right, so,
But
Yeah.
that was the reasoning behind it.
yes, Mel.
But that ain't John's point, to argue John's point. Let's say you're talking a 30-minute meeting and travel time, but you gotta go back home after that 30-minute meeting, and you gotta come back to the other meeting, which may not be the same place or same distances, but all of that is a factor, and I don't, I agree in terms of the logic. I don't see the logic except they're trying to fix it into a certain number and not gonna go over on any particular day. That's only, and I don't know if that's gonna work out financially in terms of pros and cons. So,
I think we're
I don't
pretty,
necessarily wanna change it, but
I think we're paid for the contribution that we make, not necessarily, a 30-minute committee meeting is a rarity in my experience, okay?
Yeah.
They're long, you know, 60 or 180 minutes. Excuse me, 60 or 100, 90 minutes. So I'm suspicious of that rationale. I guess I'll leave it up to consensus.
I wouldn't make a motion to change it. I don't think it's significant enough.
Any other comments?
Hmm?
Just looking for any other comments.
Okay. Just for the record, then, I will move that, we change B number 2, shall receive a stipend for each meeting attended.
Could we make
So
it,
the-
So
Say that
you're
again.
making a motion to change it.
In other words, if you go to 2 meetings in the same day, you're
You
gonna get
want
two.
$50 per meeting,
Yeah,
no matter what time, no
Right.
matter what, okay.
right.
So it should go,
If you go to a physician's
Take two
office,
out then.
you don't necessarily,
You can combine 1 and 2. You can combine 1 and 2. It says each board member should receive $50 for attendance of any scheduled or special call board meeting. And just include committee meeting in there.
yeah, that was what, okay.
I mean, that's,
All
cause you wanted $50 per any meeting, correct?
That's correct.
So just include committee meeting in there
And-
instead of just board meeting, special call meeting.
Should we add the language into the motion that you told me when I came on board, is that a meeting to get a stipend is a meeting that is scheduled, that minutes are taken, and that there's a presiding officer.
It's under.
So in other words, you can't have an informal meeting and then say that it.
No, that's
that-
under 4.
Huh?
That's on 4.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't read it. All right, so what I'm proposing then is this. I'll amend my motion. That each board member shall receive $50 for attendance at any scheduled or special called board meeting or committee meeting. Oh, I mean,
It's already in there. Or meeting of a board committee.
okay. I still like it, shall receive a stipend for each meeting attended. I think that adds less language.
Are we suggesting B2? So,
Hmm?
is that B2? Meeting
Yeah.
stipend
Yeah.
number 2?
So
Is that, I mean,
For
that's
instance, on
reading.
the 8th, there's gonna be an operations meeting and a, policy meeting, right? On the 8th, okay? So at the rate we go with these meetings, that's gonna be most likely, a total of 3, maybe 4 hours.
But I don't think that's addressing that one. Number 2, when you read it, it's really talking about meetings prior to the general board meeting, apparently.
Okay, let's
We used to
address
have,
that.
we used to have some committee meetings scheduled prior to board meetings.
Yeah.
So instead of getting paid for that committee
Yeah, you
meeting,
get the
you're
board.
getting paid for the board meeting. So that's what that was, because
Yeah,
there were
that's what
some,
it is.
there were some committee meetings scheduled prior to the full board meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
my question is then, if the committee meeting went an hour and a half, and then the board meeting went 3.5 hours, You got a total of 5 hours. How much would they get?
You only got paid for the board meeting. If you went to both meetings, if you went to a committee meeting and then to the board meeting, you would only get paid for the board meeting. If you came to the committee meeting and left before the board meeting, you would have gotten paid for the committee meeting.
I fail to see why, but, and I'm not challenging
Right.
you.
No, I understand.
You're just telling me the way it
Right.
is. Yes, Doctor?
I have an idea. What about, the whole idea is, what if you come for, well, like today, agenda setting was what, 20 minutes? Pay $50 for 20 minutes and then come to this and you got another $50. You could just say, what do those meetings add up to on that day? The total time, anything under 4 hours is 50 and anything over 4 hours is 100. That just seems like, I don't know, this would end up being a lot of money, John. I think it would end up being a lot of money over the course of a year. And especially now agenda setting, that was never a meeting in the past. And you're getting, so let's say you do go home, you have a meeting in the morning for, well, some like it's in the morning, but let's say you have one in the afternoon, and you're there an hour, and then you go home until let's say the board meeting at 6, you're getting the mileage compensation, so I just think it should be the total number of minutes you're there. Then that also eliminates anybody who comes in halfway through and wants their stipend. How long you're there is how much money you get. That's what I was saying.
John? I think our issues, I think our issues are covered in these things though. When you read them, I think the number one is about those meetings that John's concerned about. Even if you get paid for them, it's because I would rather know, whoever's interpreting it might be interpreting it differently, but it says $50 for attendance at any scheduled or special call board meeting or any scheduled meeting of a board committee. Didn't say same day or different days. Then number two, that's talking about something that's gonna happen when we have a regular board meeting. If we also have a committee meeting, you're only gonna get paid the regular $100 unless it goes over the 4-hour limit. Then number three covers that.
Well, you get paid $50 for the board.
You get $50 for
Yeah.
board meetings
No,
and
you
then,
get,
and 400, and then when the meeting is over 4 hours, then you get $100.
you get $100.
Yes.
So you're getting paid for that.
I
So,
understand what you're saying,
okay.
but number
Yeah.
2 reads that only in the circumstance that a committee meeting immediately precedes a board meeting.
Yes.
That's when you only get 1 per diem, not if you were doing, you had a marathon of 3 committee meetings.
Right.
Essentially, the way the policy's written right now, I believe we should be getting paid 50 per committee meeting. Because number 2 only addresses if a committee meeting precedes a board meeting.
Right. That not one committee meeting.
Might not be what's
Preceding
happening,
another committee
but-
meeting, yeah.
Based on what's here,
Yeah.
it needs more work based on multiple different.
Yeah.
Just as a technical thing, it should say stipend rather than per diem, I think. Okay. Yes, Earl?
I was gonna ask Robin, when you do the budget for the board, do you include all the committees?
Well,
Basically,
we did,
Uh-huh.
and then when we set the budget, in February, yes, we did,
okay,
Because we did just start assigning committees, I think, when we met the budget.
okay,
We had already made the assignment.
okay.
All right, so great, so what you said then is that number 2 does not really apply to back-to-back committee meetings? No.
Yeah.
All right, so do we wanna leave 2 on its own and then have a separate,
I think 2 does need to be changed to say not to exceed $100 or something like that, because number 3 indicates basically that anything that's over 4 hours receives 100. So I think that in the event that there's a committee meeting and a board meeting that culminates to over 4 hours, I don't think it should exceed anything over 100, but.
how about if we take 3, okay, and say add board meetings in the plural that amount to more than 4 hours. So that if you have a board meeting that,
It says,
If you
three
have a
includes
board
everything
meeting-
except for committee. Or
if you have a board meeting that takes 3 hours, and a committee meeting that takes an hour and a half, that's 4.5 hours of time. It doesn't matter what kind of meeting it was. It's the time and participation that we're being paid for, not the type of the meeting.
You'll get the $100 then.
Because the way it's written right now, you
But
get
written,
50
you'll
for
get
the committee
$100.
meeting, and then 50 for the board meeting, but if a board meeting goes over 4 hours, then you get 100, so you'd actually get 150, the way this is written right now.
I'm more interested in the back-to-back board, committee meetings
The
than,
back-to-back committee meetings look like $100, John. That would look like it should be from number one.
Uh-huh.
Because it doesn't specify whether it's back-to-back or not. It just said each meeting should receive $50.
I mean, unless it's somewhere else in here where,
Yeah. Number one doesn't specify day-to-day, back-to-back, whatever. It just says each meeting. That's the way I'm reading it anyhow.
I agree.
and board meetings or board hearings lasting more than 4 hours in a single day. So the question is that cumulative?
That's an exception now.
Right.
That's an exception.
So is the 4 hours cumulative, or is it per meeting?
No, it says
Well,
and or.
hearings, I don't think that would matter.
It says and or.
Because number 3 covers that. I don't think it would matter whether it's cumulative or not. If it's not cumulative, you're talking 2 meetings, you only get $50 for each meeting. Even if it's an hour and an hour.
Okay, so what do you wanna do? I started off by asking why we do it this way.
I think we'll make sure that we're clear on the language, and, you know, but everybody else think, I think we'll make sure that language is saying what everybody thinks it's saying.
I need you to make it more clear, because the practice is you
I
get
know.
paid. So however you want it to be,
Mm-hmm.
you need to make it more special, because the practice is you get paid for 1 meeting per day,
Yeah, that's not what how that read.
and that's how it's budgeted, 1 meeting per day,
Okay.
David,
so.
I agree, that was the implementation, the wording is pretty clear. I don't know how the implementation got different, but
Well, there may have
we
been.
just need to change the implementation, because the wording seems pretty straightforward.
What are you
Although we've
saying?
talked about it for quite a while, so it can't be all that
I
straightforward.
mean, what are you saying, David? I'm not clear what you're saying.
Each meeting you get $50.
Right.
If it goes over 4 hours, you get $100. So,
Well, and the way, would you guys agree that 3 reads though, because it says and or, that would be cumulative? Or could be interpreted as being cumulative 4 hours?
it says work session and or board
And
meeting, so
It says scheduled
Oh,
work
I
session
see.
and or at a board meeting and or hearing, and I also think that
That's the overflow.
committee's not in there right now, committee
No.
meetings are
That's
not
the-
in there,
stick
so.
committee in there.
That's the over 4 hour routine there now.
So if you put.
Anytime you go over 4 hours, that amounts to too many meetings in terms of, I think, the way the intent is. If it's a board meeting going over 4 hours all alone, that's $100. If it's a board meeting going 2 hours and a committee meeting preceding it going 2 hours, that's $100, 2 hours and 1 minute, that's $100. All right, that's where I'm reading this. I think that's
yeah,
pretty
because
clear, yeah.
the affordability is a red herring, because if you design the meetings, the workload is not elastic, okay? So if you design meetings that will be shorter than 4 hours, you're not gonna get all the work done, you're gonna have more meetings, which costs more money. So I would venture that it costs more to have 4 meetings under 4 hours than it does to have 2 meetings
You know,
over 4 hours. So that's why I don't think it's fair to have money driving the issue.
yeah, but I don't know. I would say, why don't we vet it? I mean, from the maximum,
All right, so how about each member shall receive $50 for attendance at any scheduled or special board/committee meeting, period. Okay, and then that's all we have to have,
yeah, that's all you have to have there, probably.
that's all you have to
If
have.
number 3 covers.
Any member shall
that,
receive
that
$50 for attendance at any scheduled or special board/committee meeting. And then if you wanna make it even clearer, you can add any meeting is subject to the 4-hour rule on stipends.
That's not true. But if you add that, then if you have, if our meeting go over 4 hours, then you're saying that's $100. But technically, our meeting is $50, no matter how long it goes.
Okay. All right, so
Unless we have.
we don't subject committee meetings to the 4-hour standard. Is that what you're proposing? We don't subject committees to the 4-hour standard. If you have a committee meeting that runs over 4 hours, that's
Right.
tough bananas.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's a
I-
good practice, cause then
That's,
Huh?
it keeps, it puts the committee members, and there's an incentive for them to do their work efficiently and quickly and keep it under 4 hours. I certainly don't think committees should be meeting for 4 hours.
I don't think we've ever had a committee meeting go over 4 hours, have we?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, the
right.
time I've been on the
Let me ask,
So I think it's fine the way it
let
is.
me ask you,
It's fine.
Exactly.
total, Ms. Cliftonberry, with, committee meetings and salaries, what that total, so you would figure approximately what it is? You know, some years ago, I suggested that we should raise our salary and just forget about the other stuff.
I don't know the total between the salaries and the committee, but for the month of April, if someone attended all the committee meetings and board meetings, you got $950 for the month of April, because we had 13 meetings. That included all committee meetings and that was.
Yeah, that's what
So
that's-
that's, if someone, so a person could have gotten $950 for the month of April.
Just for.
Just for the month of April, just for the
In
meeting.
stipends.
As Earl has often
So that was
said,
the $50 and the 100, because our board meetings were over 4 hours, so you got $100. So, but that was not paying, that was
wasn't
not,
paying the duplicate.
that was not playing and that was not playing the duplicate.
okay,
And that didn't include mileage.
but as Mr. Earl Campbell has often said, when talking about expense for meetings and conventions, it can make, all of those committee meetings that you go to can make you a better board member. That was the purpose for the stipend in the first place, was to encourage people to go to meetings that they may not be a member of the committee on. All right, so if you don't value the work, if you don't value the individual's attendance, cut the stipend. If you think that their presence helps the functionality of the whole board, then continue it.
Well,
No, I was just gonna make a suggestion, because we have two different
Okay.
We use stipend and per diem in here, can we
Just use stipend on both
just
there.
use stipend, it's on number 2 and 5.
I think we do need to vet it though a little bit deeper than Earl, as suggesting Robin pointed out. We need to look at, well, right now, what's the average attendance? How many meetings? You know, and then kind of get a hold on how much that's costing us.
Well,
You know,
these-
because if everybody comes to every meeting, you know, then that's different than if 5 people, 6 people come to every meeting.
The
And
more,
it'd be more practical that we understand how much we're putting out there for that. And that's in consideration of the next thing is, what if the stipend is raised and, but I don't agree with that stipend being raised only because people have no incentive then to come to the committee meetings.
the more people that come to committee meetings, the less of a discussion you end up having at the regular board business meeting. Okay, because more people are already on board with what has happened at the committee level. Now again, nothing can die in committee. It all has to go to the full board, whether the recommendation is yes or no. So, in this case, when the policy manual goes to the full board, we're going to have at least a half a dozen people, maybe even more than a half a dozen people, who are well-versed in what that policy manual contains, which if they weren't, we'd have to spend hours at the full board level going through each policy, the rationale for it, everybody would be kicking in wordsmithing, so you'd be paying the money out anyway, as soon as you ran over the time limit. Because that's how you end up having extra meetings. And an extra meeting is, what, 11 times 50 is $550 plus payroll expenses, plus mileage.
So you're going to, for April and May, April and May you had 13 and 14 meetings. Mostly everyone attended, the least amount was 5. So April and May, a person can make $950, that was 13 for April, and 12 for May, it was $950 for 13, and it was $900 for May.
Okay, so to me, that's putting things at cross purposes in the discussion. We're talking about the value of participation, not necessarily what it costs. That's a separate, it's a valid issue, but it's a separate issue. First of all, let's determine if members participating in committees is worth paying them a stipend for. I think it is. Okay, Dr. Kwok, you had your hand up.
You've made the assumption that, you've said it multiple times, that the stipend encourages attendance, and I wouldn't agree with that completely. I wouldn't agree with that completely.
Okay, fine,
Yeah, but you said that multiple times.
all right.
I don't think that's the motivating factor for some of us. That's my motivating factor is I'm the chair, that I wanna know what's going on personally. That's how I look at it.
I have a day job, so $50 doesn't work for me. So,
Yeah, that
Let's just be
Rachel, that's the other part of mine, that's, yeah, exactly.
The idea of compensation is that members of the board, particularly those that work, give up something to attend the meetings beyond what they're paid as a salary. So I think stipends are more than fair.
I mean, I don't see anything wrong with Westgate.
I think it's good the way it is, but I do think we need to be clear on how it's supposed to be. If it hasn't been that way, and if it's
Okay.
the intention of how it's supposed to be.
All right, I move that we leave 1 and 2 as is. All in favor? Okay, 2 positive, 1 no. All right,
You were no, Joe?
huh?
You said leave 1 and 2 as is, so it was a 3 or 2 and 1?
It's a 3-2. It's a 210. Okay.
Right.
Number 4, meetings are defined as official board and committee meetings at which minutes are taken and published for board member distribution. That's pretty straightforward. Increases in per diem payments to board members take effect immediately after approval by the board. Again, I think that should be stipend, because
Yes,
per
I'll
diem.
change, I'll change them, all of them will get changed.
Universal
to
replacement, okay, all right. Expenses, district travel expenses. When members incur in-country travel expenses for carrying out their board responsibilities, they may be reimbursed from district funds upon submission of completed travel vouchers and supporting receipts. Mileage and expense reimbursement will be in accordance with the amount set by the district for its employees. Okay, 2 things. I think we should substitute, cross out may and either have a will or a shall, okay? Because may
They shall be
may
reimbursed.
implies that they might not get reimbursed.
They put shall.
And then number 2, I'd like to add a sentence, this does not imply that board members are employees of the district.
Where'd you add that?
Hmm?
At the end of the day.
Why?
Yeah.
Because last 2 winters ago, it,
You go back again.
yeah,
But I mean, yeah,
So-
we all,
Historical
you wanna know why
It's law.
World War I started, so that you might not start World War
I mean,
III,
I understand that, but I mean,
okay?
you don't rewrite the Constitution because those things are, that's my point. I mean, the law is here. We are not members of,
All right, let me put it in a different context then.
Yeah.
There is disagreement in some circumstances whether we are employers, employees, or elected officials. Now, if you ask me what those circumstances are, I can tell you.
I understand. Let's move on. I don't think it's necessary.
Can
You
I,
don't put that in there for.
can I ask you what in this paragraph makes you think the paragraph implies that?
Because it says that within the amount set by the district for its employees.
I'm just saying it's in accordance with it's pointing to a regulation.
I can't explain it without telling you what happened when the board ramrodded circumventing the procurement code by getting us labeled as employees to hire the marriage counselor. So in that case, we were labeled employees. Now someone's asking us to be labeled employees. So I think we're neither.
Then maybe we need to have an entire section addressing that. Maybe we need to address it in its own section as opposed to under here under expenses and mileage.
Sure, whatever.
I think that would be more pointed.
Okay.
It won't get lost that way.
All right. Travel allowance in and out of state. In addition, each fiscal year, board members will be provided with a travel allowance for continuing education activities, including conferences and seminars relating to their board responsibilities. The exact amount will be determined annually during the budget process. Any amount spent over the annual limit becomes the sole responsibility of the individual board member. Transfer of travel allowance between board members is prohibited unless approved by the board majority. Robin, I have a question. When we get our board budget report, does it identify whose, there's
Yes.
about 10 lines for the travel.
You're
Does it
identified by your district.
Okay, all right, okay. I was just curious about that. Anybody got any objections to that? Yes,
Well, we're not really adhering to this because it is transferred between board members, so a board member, like if one person has gone over their limit and somebody's way under, it is, transferred one within the board
and
budget.
who approved that practice?
Yeah.
We'll go through the,
I don't know.
They'll go through the chair. The practice has been that because it is the board budget, if the money is transferred because it's not necessarily, I'll just use you for a minute. So if John had $1,800, it's not just John to go out and spend up $1,800. So if you don't go to all the committee meetings, if you don't go to conferences within the state, and the stipend is even divided out amongst all the board members evenly. I'm using $1,500. So if Rachel only goes to one in-state conference, and it might only cost $500, so there's $1,000 left in her area. If you don't go at all, and then if Melvin goes and he goes to all the in-state conferences and it comes up to over, then we would transfer what Rachel has over within the year to offset the negative in Melvin's.
Okay, I support line item transfers.
So that's what,
But I'm just questioning how a practice was allowed to trump a board policy.
I can't answer that for you. So,
Okay,
but the
so-
problem is.
It's
can I
sort
explain
of like some
further?
of the other policies that they that had not been the practice when someone wrote that
Okay,
up, because that's not the
I
practice.
think a given has to
Yes.
be that practice is aligned with policy.
Yeah.
So can I explain something too that Robin brought up? So when the budget is made, well, as she said, all the board members get the same amount, okay? Doesn't take into account how far you live from the district office, for example, because you're gonna have more mileage incurred. Or if you're somebody who tends to go to more of the meetings, there's no individual allotment, okay? It's all, each person gets the same. And when you think about it, that money is not yours, you have to earn that money. So, it's not like you're taking my money, if you haven't used that money or that allotment, it's the board's allotment. So I don't see a problem with what actually is happening, but, that's not what's written here.
It's just a simple question of, do we take away the policy that prohibits line item transfers? Okay.
I would suggest we modify it to the way that is.
So,
Yeah.
where David is.
No, David,
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm gonna finish with you first. Is that acceptable? Does that meet what you're talking about?
what do you mean?
Is that we either change the policy or change the practice, but one or the other has to be changed. Because there's no sense having a policy if we don't follow it.
I agree, and it seems sort of, I mean, we can spend all our time on this, or we can spend our time on, you know,
Just scratch that last
More-
line.
I think we'll be the judge of it, but go ahead.
well, what I'm saying is, we can talk about this forever. You wanna have a board vote every time we've got to say, oh, John, you went over this year, so now we've gotta transfer Rachel's into there. And then, okay, Mel, you're under, now we're gonna transfer Christina's into yours, so whatever it is. I mean, it's time intensive.
Okay, so let's do away with it then.
Scratch
Let's
it.
do away with it.
Yeah,
I move we scratch it, the last line there.
I'm sorry, Mel?
I move we just erase the last line of that.
I'll second.
I don't see it.
but you never got it. Is that what you were gonna say?
No?
No, go ahead.
So the motion is just to strike the last line?
The last
Yeah,
one,
that gets rid of all that.
yes, and I seconded.
So you're leaving the,
I think,
Yeah,
I don't know, you can correct me, we're leaving the option
Okay.
to,
motion's been made and seconded
Yes,
to strike the last line of section B.
right.
All in favor?
But wait a second, you've got somebody who wants to comment. Dan, are you still in comment?
Yeah, I will point out, one, I don't like line item transfers, reclasses, because it screws your budget up the next year. Secondly, we're asking the district for this kind of discipline. I think it's kind of hypocritical for us not to have it. You know, we're telling the finance department, stop moving money around.
Well,
So, you've gotta go one way or the other.
that's the same, not the same thing though.
Oh, no, it is the same thing, we're moving money around, and you're supposed to stick within your budget, so if you wanted to go to 3 conferences, but your budget was only enough for 2, oh well, that's the discipline we're asking the district to do.
So,
Stay in your budget.
right,
Maybe we should budget better.
so,
I think that's the solution,
Yeah.
but I would be opposed to taking this
so,
out.
one second, Robin. So, I agree with, I wanna make sure I agree with you. All right, so let's say that you've got X amount of money, it's allotted by district on the report, right? So you got X amount of money allotted for conferences, right? And if you decide to go to 3 of the 4 that you're offered, you're gonna have to fund it within your budget and not expect someone else's budget to pay for it. Only because it disrupts the discipline of sticking to the budget, right?
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I support
Yeah,
that.
it's the, we
In
need,
its entirety.
we need to get that discipline. We all need to have that discipline. We need to budget better. I mean, you know, that, when I was telling Tanya, you need to budget by month. We need to, you know, I just feel bad about us relaxing it all and then demanding the district
Yeah, I got,
have more
I
discipline.
got you, Will, don't worry. It's just like, it's the beginning of the year, so there's a couple of conferences, one in August, one in October. And you can sign up for them without, because you wanna go, without thinking at all of the impact on the budget. And that's what you're asking us to do, is to pay attention to whatever we're doing, the impact on the budget. And it's not to not spend the money it's in the budget, but to spend it prudently. Will, you had your hand up.
I disagree with Dave just because of the fact that also he may make that decision to make us do that today, but we don't know when school staff have a budget to say that, hey, we don't have enough money for this right here to happen, and then they move money around in their budget. We're not sure that we're gonna get the information to say, hey, this specifically happened, even though we may say that. So I mean, I think hypothetically speaking, also when we're elected officials, we're not staff members, and we're going to learn at these conferences to make this district better. So if there's money that's allocated, and I don't see a reasoning not to say, look at if Mr. Campbell's not going, and he said he's done everything. I don't see the problem with me using the money that's in line within that he was given by however he was getting. If he said, hey, I don't know how to use it, because I'm sure they're saying, hey, look here, if we have people who are not going to lead it in me. And I'm sure they're taking that money, they may put it someplace else. How do we know what they're doing with that money? We don't. Because we only know what they tell us. So therefore, I'm saying I think that you put all these stops on the board, but I'm not in agreement to that.
I have to ask the question, if we did do it in a lump, right? How could we explain to a member, if a member hasn't gone to a conference all year, and wants to go one late in the year, and can you say, oh, I'm sorry, we overspent the group budget, you can't go? I don't think that's appropriate.
Well, I can say in the past, at least from my time on the board of 2.5 years, Robin has kept track of, you know, who's gone, like for example, this year nobody went to the National School Board Association conference because it was during our superintendent recruitment. So in the past though, it's been half the board members get to go one year and then the other half the next year. So, I mean, Robin's keeping track of that. I think it's, if you're gonna have a budget that you're not gonna move around, it's gonna take quite a bit of work to come up with those allowances for each person, because you gotta have mileage taken into account. You probably gotta have the chair taken into account, because the chair tends to go to more stuff, just like Earl did when he was the chair. I go to more stuff. I mean, there's, you know, I don't know, it just seems like just a general, the way we're doing it to me seems okay. But I understand, David, what you're saying, but I think we need to think of it as an allotment for the whole board, and that the divvying it up to each person is not really accurate. It's just 1/11.
Mel, then David.
I think our focus should be on what the intent of that amount is, as opposed to individual. I know we want to encourage every individual to do their due diligence for each district, particular district, but overall, what are we getting? It's a fact-finding thing going to these conferences, et cetera. And if Rachel could go and I can't go, I don't think those dollars matter. As long as we stay within that budget item as a board. That's when I think it's okay to shift the line items if he's staying within a certain category. That's why I agree with Will to a degree. In our total budget, people do move things around certain sections of the academics. And that's the same thing with this in my mind. I don't know.
David?
Well, we need to budget it differently then. I don't wanna give up on us budgeting properly and then staying within budget. And the example that really got under my skin was when I found out that the principals are using supply money as for stipends for the coaches. You know, that just incensed me. We gotta stop that stuff. And it starts with us. We need to budget properly and then stay within the budget. You don't wanna budget by individual member and budget at the board level
Yeah,
and stay within that.
yes.
But you still have the question of who makes the decision. Because here, you know, you do have the transfer of allowances, could, you know, the board majority could say, because it is the board's budget. And we do look at it every month.
I mean, so if we did away with that, and we still have to be doing whatever that says anyhow. That's what you say, right? Generally, we have
We're
to
reviewing
come to
the
the
budget every
board
month.
for board
It's on the
improvement.
agenda.
Right.
I, to support what David's talking about, I would propose that if we were, God forbid, a private industry, we would be considered 11 departments in a budget, and each department gets its budget, and each department manages its budget. So the individual conceptually can be a department within the budget. Secondly, this conversation is more appropriate at the finance committee. We're talking about a policy here, we're trying to solve the budgeting problem. Budgeting problems should be sent to the finance committee, not the policy committee. So I would suggest that we just work on the wording of this policy without getting into deep philosophical arguments about how the budget is set up. Everybody's made their statements, okay? So I think there's a motion on the floor to strike the last sentence of section B. Correct? Okay, we'll vote on that now. All in favor? Okay. Policy 3.7, diversity statement and goals. I'll let everybody read this themselves. I do have one thing that I should mention right away. Attorney General has opined that we are not a board of trustees. That is in the decision of February 11th, 2016, that we are a county board, we are a county school board, and we should that's what we should refer to ourselves as, because we're technically not a board of trustees.
Mr. Dowling, and the latest Attorney General opinion, the opinion with respect to whether the Islands Academy was properly closed, I think that was a different opinion, so I need to give that opinion to everybody before our next meeting so y'all can review it. If I remember, I don't have it with me, sir, but I think it said the Act 377, it combined those duties into one. I think that's what it said, Mr. Dowling.
Okay.
So I want to make sure I give that to everybody. I know about the opinion you're speaking of, though.
Yep.
Yes, Dr. White.
You know, I think that's exactly right, that 2016 AP opinion doesn't include that act that you just referenced, which was in 1970, where they combined the two separate Beaufort County, I should say, school districts into one, and it did become Board of Trustees, if you read that.
I'm gonna email that to everybody tomorrow, because I think that was what it said. We have that,
Yeah.
yeah.
If you could follow that up with clarification.
Yes, sir. Yes, I
But
will. Yes, I
We'll
will.
assume for now that that's the way it is, okay? And I'll withdraw my objection.
So, you know,
Why is this in there?
Yes,
Did
what
somebody
is it?
tell me?
Yeah, what is it? What is-
Number one.
What does it really say?
I know that on a district level, that is part of our statement, and that we offer equal opportunity for everybody and don't discriminate, and that may be why it's
Yeah,
in
but
there. I
it's
don't know,
something
I
we
wasn't
have
here
to do
then,
by
but Mr.
law. I
Young-
don't think we need a policy that says we're gonna do it. We cover our adherence to the statutes multiple times in other policies. I'm just trying to cut down the amount of verbiage that we have in this thing.
This is just reinforcing something like that.
I'm pretty sure you're supposed to have a diversity statement.
Yeah.
How is it enforced?
Yes.
That's what I'm
We all
interested
value
in, why is it
diversity,
in
yeah.
there? It's- yeah.
Okay, you wanna leave it alone, Mel?
Yeah, I can do any harm.
Okay. Section 2. David, question?
Yes, sir.
Should not section 2 be over, how do we keep this out of the realm of policy and into the realm of goals and, results? Is there a relationship?
You're saying you think this should be a goal? I'm not following.
I don't know why it starts with these corrective measures.
To endeavor to
Why that
employ and
language is
assign
there.
administrators, faculty, and staff to reflect the racial and cultural diversity of our community. I don't feel comfortable about working this particular one at the committee level. Board goals should be taken as a separate subject, I think, by the full board. What I just said is I think this should be a separate discussion by the full board to determine what our goals are, not have the three of us proposing that's outside of
Yeah,
our
you know, this.
I think.
I'm disoriented with this. I don't know what it's trying to say.
It's trying to be a diversity statement. And the goals of diversity. I don't think it's the board's goals.
And we had the desegregation agreement with, we had the desegregation agreement with the Office of Civil Rights. So I need to review that agreement because I believe that is part of what we agreed to with the Office of Civil Rights, that we would work towards establishing integrated unitary schools. We filed that report every year.
What is it referring to when it says these corrective measures? I mean, I don't,
Oh, wait a minute, wait.
it's not these corrective measures
Yeah,
with
I agree.
significant.
I don't have the corrective measures.
What are these corrective measures? That's
The,
why I'm not,
what he was saying was to my point. I agree. I want to know, basically, what were we doing with this, and how were we measuring, and putting this actually in play, and how do we do that? We're actually going by what is stated here. Is what I wanted to know. How are these goals being measured?
To me, it's a nice mom and apple pie statement. But
Right.
It's not necessarily a policy.
Right. That was kind of my adjustment.
Now that these corrective measures, I think, refers back to section 1, where it says identifying, correcting policies, practices, programs. I think that's what it's referring to. It could be a lot clearer.
The first sentence, yeah.
You said it's referring to what now?
That first sentence in number 1,
One.
in Roman numeral 1, where it's in the second line, it says, that we're committed to identifying and correcting policies, practices, programs, and procedures perpetrating achievement gap and institutional racism in all forms. So I think that first sentence in Roman 2, these corrective measures, is referring back to that sentence.
Right, but also, my question is, how are these being measured? I mean, we have them, they look good here, but how are we putting these in our everyday practice, and we're making sure that we're not in violation of these rules and laws?
David? David? Wasn't there a lot of discussion at the results committee meeting about abandoning the emphasis on the term achievement gap and instead talking about parity between demographic groups and the state, and the district, and the state?
Oh, you were there.
Hmm?
You were there.
Yeah.
So you know that,
Okay.
that we had a speaker talk about that, and we will. We
Yeah.
will try to reword if it's valuable to reword. Because there is the issue that achievement gap has a national definition, and we don't want to create our own. So we're going to discuss that.
All right, so let's leave it in for now. But I'd like to take that up later, okay? All right, so the corrective measures tie to the first sentence of the preceding paragraph, so they should be okay to leave. Okay, 3.8, conflicts of interest. This is just a technical thing, but items 2 and 3 seem to talk about specifically nepotism. So I think 1 might want to be reworded to tie into 2 and 3. Because there is a section following that about conflicts of interest. I know nepotism's a dirty word, but historically.
And what is 2? Just the definition? There's no policy. What's the policy there?
It's going to, from numeral 4,
It's gonna be addressed in 4.
A, B, C, yeah.
So 1 through 3 are just defining.
Okay, 3 is called Board of Education Conflicts of Interest. And 4 is Employee Conflicts of Interest. Does the law make a distinction between board members and employees? Wendy?
The ethics committee, you want me to look at the Ethics Act and what it says?
I would
Yeah.
expect that the definition of conflict of interest applies across the board.
I agree with you that it would apply to everyone. Public employee
Anybody got any
definition.
thoughts on that? All right, we'll leave it alone then. Employee conflict of interest.
Familiar, right?
I don't have any particular problem, except I wish we could call it what it is. It's a nepotism policy. And people don't like to use the word because it brings back bad memories, but when you're trying to reference what the policy is on nepotism, it's helpful to see the word somewhere.
But put the word in there, John. I don't know why the word is significant, but put the word in there. You're right, it's clearly nepotism what's being talked about, so you need the word in there.
I think it'd be
The word
helpful.
in there.
Yes, Rachel?
D needs a period at the very end.
Mhm.
D needs a period at the very end. And then also throughout this section, it talks about, things can't happen without written approval of the board, or, where's the other place I saw it? Written approval of the board. There's another place where it mentioned, oh, unless otherwise approved by the board. I think we need to be clear on majority vote or a vote. It just says,
How about substituting, take the written approval of the board, how about without board action? That's a vote, it's in the record, that's really all you need for documentation.
Which letter are you on?
Three.
Roman
Three.
numeral
I still don't see what two does, I mean.
well, it's defining what an immediate family member is throughout this section.
Yeah, it's talking about nepotism without saying the word nepotism.
What I'm saying is, why can't that be a part of three? I mean, if,
Well,
it doesn't seem like you need to define something as a part of the policy and then come back and talk about it.
Because it applies to both subsections. It applies to the Board of Education conflicts of interest section and the employee,
I
or district
understand
employees.
both.
So that's why they have it as its own,
Zone what?
the definition of family member.
How about if we take number two and say, for
These are
purposes
policy
of this
statements.
nepotism policy?
These are policy statements.
How about if we take number two and say, for purposes of this nepotism policy, immediate family member, blah, blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. I mean, I don't see why that's standing alone, that's all I'm
So
saying.
then we need to rename it because it's currently named policy 3.8 conflicts of interest.
I can see number two, starting has been three starts, so no immediate family member, and then defining what the immediate family member means.
Well, and I think the purpose, this makes a decent attempt, but it does not specify any and all areas that could be a conflict of interest. So when they say, and the avoidance of conflicts of interest by board members and VSC employees, it really, the best they can say is the avoidance of some conflicts, because there are other conflicts of interest that are not specifically highlighted here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In other words, I don't wanna have anybody come back and say, well, you've got me on this conflict of interest, but it's not mentioned here in the policy, so I didn't know I violate board policy.
I'll give you an example of something that's not here. I don't see anywhere where a person couldn't be the principal and assistant principal at the same school, for example. There's no talk with the superintendent, but it doesn't talk about anything else that's a board policy.
What do you mean?
I think you should be looking at the red line, so that you pick up the suggestions from the school board association.
Look at you.
Might be helpful.
Keeping us on track.
And where are those red lines at?
They're on the
Oh, I-
red line
You got
version.
this,
3.8.
Yeah, I gave Will's mine from last week, let's see if I have a copy here.
it's got some suggestions from the school association.
Those suggestions have been
That was from the.
These are
South
the-
Carolina
got everything
School
there
Association.
you need, you know?
been accepted.
No.
They haven't been accepted now, because it was all tabled. Or it didn't have the will
They
to go
stated
through
it
it.
on three.
Okay, so how about if we adopted all of that and then added that we will also comply with any and all South Carolina Board of Ethics rules and statutes?
The Ethics Commission,
Hmm?
the South Carolina Ethics Commission,
Yeah. I just don't wanna have it interpreted, and we all know how many people will try to interpret it as an all-encompassing definition of conflicts of interest, because it's not. It just highlights the most obvious ones. For example, it doesn't say anything about recusing if you have a relative working at a vendor that you're voting on a contract with. So, it doesn't say anything.
The ethics rules say so.
So,
under the Ethics Act, that's
if
prohibited.
if it's purporting to be an all-encompassing list
Which one?
of board member conflicts of interest, then it's not living up to its title.
Yeah, well, D covers that.
Hmm?
D covers it.
B covers it?
D.
D. So Roman numeral three D.
Oh. Shall provide services or sell products, that does not,
Provided that all transactions are in accordance with SC ethics and board members excluded from deliberating or voting on them.
I think that's too narrow myself.
What you-
Like you see other,
D is too narrow, okay? Doesn't talk about recusing yourself.
well, it says there,
Your pocketbook.
excluded from deliberating or voting on the matter.
On the matter, the only matter it references
I appreciate that, that
a
was.
board, provide services or sell products to the school,
Thanks for coming.
okay?
I mean, this is directly attributable to me, so.
Maybe it's
I
just
think it's
missing a
pretty-
couple of words.
Clear.
Board member. Oh, you know what it's saying? It's saying that you can sell things to the board, as long as you don't vote on the board decision. Okay, what I'm talking about is something
Well,
completely
and
different.
in accordance with the South Carolina State
Yeah.
Ethics Act, which goes even further
Yeah.
in that.
But
that-
what I'm talking about is a different circumstance, where we do business with another school and a board member has a spouse working on the staff of that school. And we make budget decisions that will determine whether that school is opened or closed. That to me is an ethics violation, and it's not spelled out there. That's just an example of potential ethics violations. Yeah,
Well,
So-
we had a board member whose spouse sold educational, resources.
Yeah.
So that board member could not vote on anything that had anything to do with, renewing contracts or whatever, because his wife sold education resources. She had a store in Beaufort, so,
yeah, and I'm not
So-
disputing that, I'm just saying that, to say that this is a list of all ethics violations, it's not. Yes, sir.
But if, you know, when you first get elected to the board, you're told all this. And I'll give you an example. My niece's husband worked for a firm, an engineering firm, that Beaufort County used. So I never voted on anything that they did. I just took myself out.
You want to avoid any appearance of
Okay, it's a little after 7, and this is obviously needing some more discussion, so let's break here and resume next week with this, starting with this one,
So
okay?
did you say next week we meet on Wednesday instead, Mr. Brown?
We're meeting next Monday.
Next Monday, are we
Next
meeting
Monday at the
Operations
DESC.
Greatest Wayne.
at the ES?
We'll meet up at the DESC next Monday.
It's gonna follow after the operations.
Huh?
What is DES?
That's the B.
Oh,
no,
B,
no,
you're
no,
on.
no,
You're
yes,
the
just
It took me-
D.
Okay.
It took me 7 months to figure that out, don't worry.